Every teenager has a face they make, somewhere between a smile and a wince. It's the face that says, "I'm going to survive this moment, and we will never speak of it." If you've seen that face at your own dinner table, this video is already about you. Your parents told embarrassing stories about you in front of relatives. They corrected you in public. They vented about your grades to anyone who'd listen, and somehow it didn't seem to land the same way. Or maybe it did, and nobody had words for it yet. Either way, something changed. The infrastructure around families shifted, and the old instincts stopped being harmless. Here's what actually happened. Thursday night, extended family, maybe 6 or 7 people around the table. Plates half cleared, conversations overlapping, and then a parent launches into a story about their kid. Something about a school project that went sideways, a forgotten permission slip, a text to the wrong person. The details don't matter. What matters is the delivery. He's got timing. The relatives are leaning in. Aunt Somebody is already laughing before the punchline. And the kid, 14, maybe 15, does something very small. Their fork pauses mid-air for about half a second. Their face arranges itself into something that could pass for amusement if you weren't looking closely. They might even laugh along. Good sport. Great kid. But something just happened. Their brain logged something very specific in that moment, and it had nothing to do with the content of the story. The embarrassment was secondary. The real entry was simpler. It was something more basic. They went with a laugh instead of protecting me. They had a choice there, and I felt which one they made. That's the kind of thing kids quietly keep track of. Your parents did this constantly. Your grandparents did it. For a lot of families, that was just normal entertainment. And somehow, for a long time, it didn't seem to land the same way. That silence at the dinner table, the one that follows a story like that, it compounds. Teenagers are dramatic about some things, sure, but when it comes to deciding who gets access to their real life, they're surprisingly methodical. Before a teenager shares something vulnerable with you, a crush, a failure, a fear, something that actually matters, they run a quick, internal calculation. No spreadsheet involved. Did you hold it? Did you use it for a joke at Thanksgiving? Did it show up in a phone call to their uncle 3 days later? There's basically a running trust score in the background, and it keeps updating. Every interaction is either a small deposit or a small withdrawal. You can spot when the balance tips. There's a tell, and it's incredibly specific. Watch for the mid-sentence self-correction. They start telling you something, a story from school, a problem with a friend, and then they catch themselves. You can almost see the calculation happen in real time. They edit, they pivot to something safer. They give you the surface version. That pivot is the tell. It means they checked whether this was safe and decided not really. And what makes this hard is the cumulative effect. No single dinner table story closes the door. Each small exposure tips the math a little further, until one day they're sitting across from you, perfectly pleasant, perfectly polite, and completely gone. Silence at dinner that looks like maturity, feels like something else entirely. Your parents did all of this too, probably more openly, and somehow it didn't seem to land the same way. So, what was different? Well, no smartphones. That's about 60% of the answer right there. But the other 40% is actually worth understanding. When your mom told an embarrassing story about you at the dinner table in 1987, that story stayed in the room. There were no screenshots, no group chat, no way for that moment to keep traveling after dinner. The room couldn't forward the story to 14 people by morning. That older setup protected kids in ways nobody was really thinking about. When your dad vented to Aunt Linda about your report card on a landline phone, that vent had a natural death. It ended when the phone call ended. It didn't get relayed in a text thread. It didn't become a running family joke with a digital paper trail. It just evaporated. No social media meant your weird haircut phase went undocumented for global commentary. No pagers were broadcasting your failed driving test to 6 friends in real time, which was, in retrospect, doing a lot of heavy lifting for your self-esteem. The information cycle was just slower. One embarrassing dinner moment had roughly until breakfast to exist, and then life moved on. And there's something else. Nobody had the vocabulary. Teen brain science wasn't dinner conversation. Nobody was tracking emotional patterns because the framework hadn't been built yet. Your parents weren't ignoring the damage. They genuinely couldn't see it, because the tools to see it hadn't been invented. Plus, everyone was doing it. Village parenting meant every parent vented about their kids to every other parent, which normalized the whole thing rather than isolating anyone. It was just the water everyone swam in. I keep coming back to one image. Your parents' embarrassing dinner story had a half-life of about 3 hours. Yours might have a half-life of 3 years. Same instinct, same love. Behind it, probably. Completely different infrastructure. The world changed, but our parenting instincts are still running on the old operating system. There's a phrase that gets passed down through families like an heirloom nobody asked for. That's just how we talk. You've heard it, maybe you've said it. It usually shows up right after someone flinches, as a way of smoothing over the flinch. And look, in the family you grew up in, it might have been true. Sarcasm was bonding. Teasing was affection. Public ribbing meant you were part of the group. But when that phrase gets handed down without examination, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes their internal permission slip to hide. Because if that's just how we talk is the explanation for why their story got used for laughs, then there's no point in flagging it. The system has already explained itself. And most parents running this pattern didn't install it on purpose. They inherited it. You inherited it. The pattern from your own childhood that you might have sworn you'd break, the public corrections, the family roast culture, the venting about your kids' struggles to relatives, like it's just conversation. You didn't choose it. You absorbed it. And the stuff you absorb is harder to notice because it just feels like you. A specific version of this. Your kid gets a C in biology. You're stressed, you're at your sister's house, and it comes out. Can you believe she got a C? She didn't even study. Feels like venting? Feels normal. But in your kid's mental map, you just got filed under not safe. The content wasn't terrible. The audience was wrong. And look, I know your inner voice is already pushing back. Calling this soft? Saying kids need to toughen up? That the world won't coddle them? My inner voice does the same thing. We're working on it. But the moment they stop seeing you as a safe place and start seeing you as an audience, someone who might use their stories for a room, that's when the door starts closing. And you might not even notice, because on the surface, everything looks fine. That word, fine, is exactly the problem. Let me show you what it actually looks like up close. 3 behaviors, that's what I want you to watch for. Specific things that look fine on the surface and are absolutely worth paying attention to underneath. First, they stop disagreeing with you in front of other people. This can look like maturity. Sometimes it's actually withdrawal. They've learned that pushing back in public leads to being corrected in public, so they just stopped pushing back. The disagreement went underground. Second, their room becomes a fortress, and I mean the quiet kind, where the door is just always closed. They're always in there. They come out for meals, they're pleasant, and they return. The room becomes the place they go when they don't want their real life handled out loud. Third, and this is the one that fools the most parents, they become extremely polite. I know, this sounds backwards, but a teenager who is unfailingly pleasant, who never causes friction, who gives you exactly what you want in every interaction. That kid may have learned it's easier to be agreeable than to be real. They figured out that if they perform okayness well enough, you'll stop looking closer. And it works. Parents brag about how easy these kids are. She never gives us any trouble. Think about the car ride correction, the one where you corrected them in front of their friends. Maybe it was their driving, maybe their attitude, maybe something they said. What matters is who was in the back seat. And after that ride, something shifted. They became more careful around you, more measured, polite even. A teenager who never pushes back may have decided it's safer not to risk the relationship. So, what actually caused this? Let's be specific, because vague guilt doesn't help anyone. It's the small ones. I want to be clear about that. The screaming matches, the groundings, the dramatic confrontations, those are loud enough to get addressed. People apologize after those, people recalibrate. The real damage comes from the moments that are too small to name, but too consistent to ignore. Let me catalog them, because you'll recognize at least one. The Thanksgiving report card story. Someone asks how school is going, and you jump in with the full download. The grade, the missing assignments, the teacher email, before your kid can answer for themselves. You told it with love, maybe even with humor. They received it as exposure. The car ride correction with friends present. You're driving a group of 15-year-olds, and your kid says something you think needs correcting. So you correct it, in front of 4 peers who will absolutely discuss it later. You were parenting? They were being publicly managed. The family sarcasm, the running joke about their appetite, their messiness, their love life, their lack of love life. At home, between the two of you, some of this might land as affection. At a table with 8 relatives, it burns. And when they find out, the calculation updates instantly. Private information given to this person does not stay private. Then there's the apology. The one you gave after one of these moments, when you saw their face and realized you'd gone too far. I'm not entirely sure why apologies sometimes make it worse, but I think it has to do with confirmation. The apology proves they were right to feel hurt, while also demonstrating that you did it anyway, even with the awareness, even knowing it would sting. The apology helps a little, but it doesn't erase what already happened in the room. You know the face. You've made the face. Somewhere between a smile and a wince. It's the face that says, I'm going to get through this moment, and we will never speak of it. Every teenager has a version of it. If you can picture exactly which face I'm talking about right now, then you already know more about this than you think. I'm here to name what's happening underneath these moments because it's more specific than embarrassment. And the parents who feel this most are usually the ones who care the most. A private argument and a public exposure operate on completely different levels, even when the words are identical. The difference is audience. A private argument, even a bad one, even one where you both say things you regret, is still contained. It happened between 2 people, and the dignity of both parties stayed in the room. Conflict is actually normal, healthy even sometimes. Public exposure operates on a completely different register. I keep coming back to the same idea. Being put on display without permission. Specifically in front of an audience, they have to continue facing afterward. The peer group, the social map, the question of how do others see me? None of that is vanity. It's developmental, and their brain is actively constructing their sense of self through social reflection. So when it happens in front of other people, it lands deeper than ordinary embarrassment. The internal experience goes deeper than I'm embarrassed. It reaches the person who is supposed to protect me chose not to. That's a different category of wound entirely. Embarrassment fades. Want to level up your people skills? Join our YouTube membership for early access to scripts, input on future topics, and connection with a community that gets the social struggle. Click join below and let's master human interaction together. Realizing the person who should protect you can also expose you, that tends to stick. And your well-meaning honesty, the I'm just being real defense in front of witnesses, honesty without consent, lands as betrayal. The brain's ledger stacks these contradictions. This person says they love me. This person uses my life for stories. It stacks them until self-protection wins, until the door is easier to close than to keep reopening. Remember, the issue is who was in the room when you said it. I want to ask you something, because I think this is the moment this either stays theoretical or becomes personal. Can you remember yours? The specific one. The moment a parent or an adult who was supposed to be in your corner said something in front of other people that made you want to disappear. Maybe it was at a dinner, maybe at a school event, maybe in a grocery store. The setting matters less than what followed. Somebody laughed. That's the detail that tends to survive. People forget the exact words, but the laugh, the sound of other people being entertained by something that cost you, that part stays. Then You probably did what every kid does. You smiled through it. You performed the role of someone who was fine. You learned, in that moment, something about the relationship between honesty and safety. You learned that giving this person real information could become a show later. So you started editing, which means this happened to you too. And I think you already knew that. If you're a grown adult with a fully developed brain, and you still self-correct before telling your parents certain things, then that moment did exactly what I've been describing. It rewired the ledger, changed the filing. And it happened so long ago that you've probably stopped thinking of it as a wound and started thinking of it as just the way things are. Whatever that memory is, the one that just surfaced, the one you haven't thought about in years, notice where it lives in your body. If you can still feel that moment in your body right now, then you already understand what your kid may be feeling. You lived it. And the uncomfortable truth, if this hits hard, you're actually ahead. Because the parents who feel this most are the ones most likely to do something about it. So, what do we actually do? So, let's get practical. Most parenting advice tells you to have conversations, sit down, talk it out, express your feelings, listen to theirs. That's fine. But when trust has been damaged in front of an audience, private conversations only fix half the equation. Because the wound had a public dimension, and the repair needs one too. The strongest repair often happens in a very simple moment. You're at dinner, a family gathering. Someone makes a comment about your kid, maybe a joke about their grades, their weight, their dating life. The room expects you to play along, maybe add your own detail. And instead, you redirect. You don't make a scene, you just don't participate. You might say something like, she's doing fine. What about that thing at your work, though? A gentle pivot. A shield that nobody notices except the one person who is about to need it. Your kid notices. Research on trust formation shows something worth paying attention to here. Public defenses carry disproportionate weight compared to private ones. One visible act of protection can matter more than people think because it answers the public part of the wound directly. It says, I see the room, and I'm choosing you over the room. The practical version is simple. Before you tell a story about your kid in public, pause and ask yourself whether they'd want it told. Half a second? The answer is usually obvious once you ask. Last week I heard about a dad who realized he'd been doing this for years. His repair wasn't a private conversation. He brought it up at the next family dinner, in front of the same people who'd heard all the stories. Said something simple like, I've been sharing too much about his life at these things. That's going to change. No drama, just a public course correction. His son barely reacted in the moment. But the next week, he told his dad something real. Something he'd been holding on to for months. They don't need you to be perfect. They need to see you choose them when it costs you something. But public praise can backfire too, which makes this more complicated than it first appears. If trust is already cracked, being praised in front of an audience can feel like being put on display, rather than being celebrated. The issue is consent. Did they agree to being the subject? That question applies to the good stories too. Defending them once isn't enough if the pattern is still running underneath. So let's talk about the pattern, and more importantly, where it came from, because this is where it gets personal for you. Try something. Think about how your parents corrected you when other people were around. The specific way they did it, the tone, the setting, the audience. Now scan your own parenting for echoes of that exact move. The structure, the timing, the social context. Most people find something, a correction style that got passed along, a venting habit that feels natural because you watched it modeled for 18 years, family sarcasm that you absorbed as bonding and are now deploying without realizing it lands differently when you're the authority figure and your kid is the target. The cycle is predictable. Your parents corrected you publicly because their parents corrected them publicly. Nobody examined it because examination wasn't the culture. You toughen up, you move on, you do the same thing to your kids, and the pattern continues. Out of familiarity, not cruelty. The hardest habits to change are the ones that just feel normal. So here's the intervention, and it's simpler than you'd expect. Replace the public correction with a private follow-up. Your kid says something at the dinner table that needs addressing, Instead of addressing it in front of everyone, you wait. After dinner, you find a quiet moment. Hey, can I talk to you for a sec? Just us. That's the whole script. 5 words. Same correction, minus the audience. The content stays the same, but the audience disappears, and that audience was doing 90% of the damage. Same thing with venting. The next time you feel the urge to tell your sister about your kid's grades, or their attitude, or whatever's frustrating you, pause. Ask yourself if your kid would feel safe knowing this conversation happened. If the answer is no, that's your vent being reclassified as an exposure. Find a therapist, find a journal, find a friend who doesn't know your kid. Keep the vent, change the venue. The cycle breaks the moment you notice it, and do something different, even once. When you make that shift, something specific starts to happen. Something most parenting advice never tells you to look for. The signs are small. You have to know what to watch for, because they won't announce themselves. First sign, they start a sentence and actually finish it. No mid-sentence self-correction, no pivot to the safer version. They tell you the real thing. It might be minor, something that happened at school, a small complaint about a friend. The content is almost irrelevant. What matters is that they didn't edit it on the way out. That's a sign something is opening back up. Second sign, they bring you a problem. A small one, low stakes. I think I messed up this assignment, or my friend is being weird. They're running a test, giving you a small piece of real information and watching what you do with it. Does it stay between you? Does it show up in a phone call to their grandmother later? They're watching. Third sign, and this is the one that surprises parents the most. They disagree with you about something minor. They push back on a decision. They tell you they think you're wrong about something. Then they wait, carefully. Because disagreement is a vulnerability too. It means they care enough about the relationship to risk friction instead of just routing around you. I think about a family I know. Pizza night. The dad used to use dinner as a kind of performance. Funny stories about the kids, the whole table laughing. He stopped quietly. Started asking questions instead of telling stories. It took about 3 weeks. His daughter, 15, had basically been a polite ghost for a year. She started talking, about nothing important at first, then about a friend situation that was actually hurting her. It took him completely off guard. She'd volunteered it freely, without being asked. One audience-free car ride where you just listen without correcting. One dinner where they aren't the punchline. One text they send you that you don't screenshot to anyone. These sound tiny. They are tiny, and they are everything. They're testing you because they want to come back. Now I want to address something, because I know some of you are watching this thinking, my parents did all of this, and I turned out fine. And honestly, you might be right. You did turn out fine. I believe you. Plenty of people grew up with public corrections and family roast culture and parents who vented freely, and they're functioning adults with jobs and relationships and no particular axe to grind. Resilience is real. The ability to absorb a hard moment and keep moving is genuinely valuable, and a lot of people built that capacity in exactly these kinds of environments. I'm not dismissing that, but I want to gently probe what fine actually means. Because sometimes fine means I learned to need less from that relationship. It means the closeness just never fully formed. It means there are categories of things you never told your parents, and at some point you just stopped expecting them to be the audience for your real life. You found other people for that. It was fine, but smaller than it could have been. Think about what you don't tell your parents, even now. The real stuff, the fears, the struggles, the things that keep you up at night. If there's a gap there, it probably didn't start with one big event. It started with a slow, quiet math that you ran as a teenager and never revisited. Your parents probably noticed the distance forming too, and just didn't have a framework to address it. No vocabulary, no research, no video laying it out. Just a vague sense that something shifted and no tools to trace it back. Your parents probably did the best they could with what they knew. And what they knew wasn't nothing. The fact that they missed this particular thing makes them human parents, operating without vocabulary that hadn't been invented yet. We're probably doing our own version of that right now, with things we still don't fully C. You turned out fine. Imagine what fine could have looked like if one person had chosen differently in that room. Which brings me to the thing I actually want to leave you with. Your parents didn't worry about this because the world didn't require it. The infrastructure protected them from consequences their instincts couldn't anticipate. They loved their kids, they did the dinner table thing. And the room absorbed it, and life moved on, and the half-life was 3 hours, and it was okay. You don't have that luxury. And that turns out to be an advantage. Because you're the first generation of parents who can see this pattern clearly enough to do something about it. You're watching this video, which means you're already doing something your parents didn't have the option to do. Dignity gets won or lost in public moments like these. Every family gathering, every car ride with friends, every phone call to a relative, you're choosing what to spend and what to protect. You get to choose differently than the defaults. Connection builds something grit by itself can't. A kid who comes back to you when things get hard. Because they've seen you choose them over the room enough times that the pattern is clear. The goal is the parent who worries right. The parent who, when they do get it wrong, because they will, makes the repair visible. Makes it public if the wound was public. Makes it count. Before your next family gathering, try the glance check. Just once. One story you were about to tell. Pause. Ask yourself if they'd want it told. And if the answer is anything less than yes, let it go. 1 moment. See what it costs you. See what it protects. If this landed for you, there's a whole conversation here. We haven't started yet. Subscribe if you want to keep going with it. The dinner table again, the one from the beginning. Same relatives, same noise, same moment where a story about your kid starts forming in your mouth. You feel the pull, the room is ready, and this time, you catch yourself. The goal is a kid who knows, in their bones, that you will choose them. Same dinner table, different choice. That's the whole thing. Learned something new? Hit that like button, share it with others, tap subscribe, and stick around for more. Got thoughts? I'd love to hear them in the comments.